That's all, folks. Russians suspend their offensive in Avdiivka and switch to a so-called active defense. At the same time, Ukrainians opened a brand new front line, and according to Zelensky, the war has just entered its final stage. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. It's back! And today we have our long notorious friend, the Minister of Defense of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, who went to the military factory in Tula. And as always, this is how I imagine personally this meeting went. So, Mr. Shoigu, these are our most modern developments, radars, tanks and other military vehicles. Oh, pretty interesting. And this is called the silent room. Oh, silent room, you say? I wonder if I can record my rap album here. When the special military operation is over. Mr. Shoigu, come on, do not get distracted. Let's continue our tour. Oh, look at this guy. Back in my days I was assembling missiles by hand. Mr. Shoigu, this is also what I'm doing. Alright guys, so this is my report. For breakfast I had 2 eggs and 1 sausage. Stop laughing. Then for lunch I had a soup. I did not like it that much, so I sent my cook to Siberian labor camp. And for wait a second. This does not look like my report at all. Shoigu. There is only one thing he is excelling about, which is flying again inside my apartment. But so yes guys, if you do not want Mosquito Shoigu to invade your privacy as well, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel to receive a personal Russian dude protection repellent. You can also follow me on Instagram to see how I live outside of YouTube, the link is down below. But okay, now let's get serious. And first of all, let me present you a very brief update from the south, where Russians continue to sacrifice their Black Sea fleet. And then we'll go to the east, where Russians become increasingly unsuccessful. They suspend their offensive in Avdiivka and switch to a so-called active defense. And first of all, we refer to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Russians still keep some of their Black Sea vessels in Sevastopol port, even after Ukrainians were able to successfully destroy them, including 1 submarine. And yes, they did transport some of them to other ports, such as for example in Novorossiysk, which is already on the territory of Russia. But for some reason, they decided to still keep some of their ships, which make them still a pretty easy target for Ukrainians. In addition to that, Ukrainians received 15 drones from Kosmolot company. Just pay attention, only 15. And using them, they're able to destroy $4 million worth of Russian military equipment along the southern front lines. This is, to be honest, one of the best investments so far. But another major achievement of Ukrainian army is that they were able to destroy another heavy flamethrower of Russians called Solntsepek. And guess what? The response of Russians is something what they do the best. For example, right here in this video, unfortunately, you can see as a result of a Russian attack, a local civilian infrastructure in Mirgorod has been destroyed. And just overall in the last 24 hours, Ukrainians were able to intercept 2 out of 6 Russian missiles and 11 out of 12 Shahed drones. So yes, now let me give you a similar brief update from the east of Ukraine, where Russians are getting increasingly unsuccessful, and what Putin decided to do about it. But first of all, let's make a quick stop in Russian city Belgorod, where Ukrainians recently once again attacked electrical stations, which are supplying the power to military barracks and other objects. Next we go back to Ukraine and refer to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Russians continue their offensive along Kupyansk, Svatove, Kreminna front line, while Ukrainians were mainly focusing in Bakhmut area. And even according to the general of Ukrainian army Alexander Syrsky, the biggest concentration of Russians right now is spotted to the east of Kupyansk. They are, according to him, preparing for the revenge, and for the last several days of extremely offensive activities, Russians were only able to advance that much to the west of Orlyanka, as you can see right here. Going a little bit down to Svatovi, Ukrainians reportedly were able to down another Russian military helicopter Mi-8. Like mentioned previously, the main concentration of Ukrainian attacks was against Bakhmut, and as a result they were able to destroy a relatively big ammunition dump of Russians located to the northwest of this settlement, and also according to this map they were able to do a minimal liberations to the northeast of Klishchiivka. But obviously the main combat activities over this last weekend were happening around Avdiivka, so let's talk about this really quick right now, before talking about the new front line, which has been recently opened by Ukrainians. And so yes, according to a Ukrainian soldier Yevgen Ivleev fighting in Avdiivka, he mentioned that more than for 4 days straight Russians have been attacking Ukrainian positions with artillery and Grad multiple launch rocket systems, and they were not able still to make any significant gains. And despite the superiority in the number of soldiers and military vehicles that Russians brought there, they were still once again not able to achieve anything significant, and every single day their attacks were dropping by approximately 15 to 20% until it almost stopped completely. And even the Russian infantry itself, whenever it was trying to advance in very small units of just 2 to 3 people, they were still successfully repelled by Ukrainians, not giving up any single centimeter of their land. And guess what? Ukrainians, besides defending themselves, from time to time they are able to launch their small mini counter-offensive, such as, for example, according to this video from 59th Brigade, Eyes of the Retribution, they are using Ukrainian drones to once again target Russian infantry and military vehicles, and they are doing this pretty successful. And just over the last couple of days, Russians reportedly lost up to 60 total military vehicles and approximately 200 plus soldiers, trying to, as they called it, encircle Avdiivka from the south from Seversk and from the north from Berdiche. And if you remember, during the first most active stages of Russian offensive against Avdiivka, the losses were even more significant, which, as you can see, never stopped Russians. I have no idea why they still think that the strategy of Joseph Stalin from Second World War, by winning battles with the numbers of people and sending waves after waves of soldiers, why they think that this is a superior tactics when clearly it's not working. But at the same time, when your enemy is doing a mistake, why would you want to interfere? Just let them do what they do, right? And just for you to see how much land Russians were able to capture in these 4 days of offensive, this is the changes in the map since October 13. So pretty much, yes, that's it. That's all the land Russians were able to capture at a cost of 2 or even 3 plus thousand lives. And yes, guys, my fight with YouTube still continues. I'm not able to show a lot of uncensored combat footage, so as you can see right here, I have to censor it. But if you want to support my work and see fully uncensored episodes, which are also coming in early access, please go ahead and check my Patreon. The link is down below. There is 1 week of free access for you to see if you like it or not, and I will appreciate it. Thank you so much. But wait, there is more, because besides all that, Ukrainians were also able to reopen a long-forgotten front line to the south of Avdiivka. But first of all, also, that it is very worth mentioning that Russians tried to attack Ukrainian positions next to Novaya Mikhailivka, and it was also very unsuccessful. Ukrainians repelled everything easily, not allowing Russians to capture any single meter. And then as you go to Mariinka, this is exactly the new front line I'm talking about. So, long story short, Ukrainians taking advantage of this temporarily, which looks more like permanent, hiccup of Russians, and they launched their own counteroffensive to the north of Marinka, and reportedly were even able to recapture some territories. And the significance of this particular front line, in case it is successful, is that, as you can see, first of all, there is a major road which goes through Marinka, and then there is another major road which goes to the south of Avdiivka, right? Represented by these yellow lines. And then both of these lines, they get intersected inside Donetsk region, next to Donetsk city itself. So basically, Ukrainians, in case they're able to establish the control over this highway in Marinka, they will temporarily, or maybe once again permanently, disrupt the logistics of Russians to the south of Avdiivka, making future offensive of Russians against this city to be even more complicated. And speaking about the destruction of Russian military equipment, the Ukrainian army of drones was able to destroy a total of 428 pieces of Russian military equipment in the last week, total combined. And now, the main question of the video. What is the response by Vladimir Putin? And well, first of all, in order to understand the total absurdity and ridiculousness of whatever Putin is gonna say next, we have to pay attention to some of his previous interviews. So, earlier last week he mentioned that Ukrainian counteroffensive completely failed. Ukrainians are not doing anything, it is only Russians who are advancing and capturing, or liberating even more of Ukrainian land. Then in another interview he mentioned that the total losses of Ukrainian army in comparison to Russian losses are approximately 8-1, which basically means if Russians lost at least 2,000 to 3,000 soldiers in Avdiivka, the total number of Ukrainian losses, according to him, should be anywhere around 24,000. Does it make sense to you guys? Let me know in the comments. And here is the most interesting part, which just once again confirms how much you can trust the statements made by the Russian authorities. So, back in September 12th, Putin said that since the beginning of so-called Ukrainian counteroffensive, they lost, pay attention here, 18,000 military vehicles. Not soldiers, not since the beginning of the war, but since the beginning of Ukrainian counteroffensive this summer, 18,000. And then, couple of days ago, the Minister of Defense of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, he gave his interview and mentioned that since the beginning of Ukrainian counteroffensive, they lost approximately 1.5 thousand military vehicles. So, as you can see, they even contradict themselves, Putin and Shoigu. You see, I cannot even find words to describe this ridiculousness. They do not even know, they do not even communicate between each other trying to make such statements. It is just like they pick these numbers from, I don't know, whatever, and it's like me saying Russians lost 2.3 million people in the last second. And then I'm looking straight into camera, not smiling, trying to show that I'm serious. And logically, after all this, however much logic in all these statements there is, Putin started to change the narrative about Russian offensive, specifically in Avdiivka, and switch, as he called it, to an active, quote-unquote, defense. And I mean, if according to him Russia is so dominant, Ukrainian losses are massive and uncontrollable, Ukrainian army is just a bunch of guys who do not even know what they are doing, and Russians are professional warriors, why would they need to stall their offensive according to Putin? That's a pretty good question, right? However, there is a logical answer to this. According to the Institute for the Study of War, for example, the reason why Putin is saying about Russians pretty much almost completely stalling their offensive and switching to active defense is to lower the expectations in case there is inevitably no results of Russian offensive in Avdiivka, which once again, I don't think any major breakthroughs will happen. Because the logic here, surprisingly, is clear. If Russians will be screaming non-stop everywhere, the authorities, the propaganda, the Russian media, that Russians are successful in Avdiivka, we are winning 100%, and then inevitably nothing will happen, the population will be confused, But if you prepare the population by saying that it is kinda going slowly but surely, we're actively defending, in this case, if nothing actually is happening, the population will be quite understanding. And just once again, besides almost completely suspending their own Russian offensive, they're also now preparing, or how they called it, actively defending against upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive, which to the all logics of the world simply does not make sense unless you're a Russian propagandist. And what is this so-called active defense? Well, once again, referring to the Institute for the Study of War, they claim that this means that Russians will barely advance, if any advancement at all, but they might and most likely will continue their distant attacks with the artillery, for example, which is just like kinda not letting Ukrainians advance at the same time and not advancing themselves. So it will be just a long-range warfare with neither of the sides achieving any major breakthroughs. But there is one thing to mention, however. Every single time Russians were suspending the offensive in the past and switching to defensive or even evacuating the local population, it was almost always right before Ukrainians were able to liberate some pretty big territories. So let's see if it's gonna happen this time as well. If you don't want to miss this, just please consider as always subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. Thank you so much my patrons for your support and see you tomorrow.